From railways to irrigation, China agrees to work with the Philippines on 30 projects worth over $3 billion. Hello, I'm Almond in Washington, D.C., and this is The Heat. When Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte visited Beijing in October, he received a pledge of $15 billion in investments for his country. Last week, a Philippine delegation secured funding for 3 large infrastructure projects, including a river pump irrigation project, a new dam, and a railway line. Chinese aid and investment will be instrumental in closing the Philippines' massive infrastructure and economic gap. CGTN's Barnaby takes us to Duterte's hometown of Davao City, one of the first places to benefit from China's investment.
The transformation of Davao City in the southern Philippines from rebel and gangland to what is now perceived as one of the safest and most business-friendly cities in the country is largely credited to its former mayor, Rodrigo Duterte. Now that he's Philippine president, Davao is getting another facelift, this time quite possibly with the help of China.
Right now, I think we have a memorandum of understanding between Mega Harbor and China dredging. Since it's a major reclamation project, I think China dredging can definitely help us, because I think that's one of their expertise, if I'm not mistaken. And since we want this to be a world-class development, we welcome the help of companies like China Dredging, no?
A port, government offices, residential and commercial complexes built on at least 2 artificial islands could soon be the view from Davao's coastal communities. Residents we spoke with say the possible involvement of a Chinese company that reportedly helped China construct man-made islands in the South China Sea does not bother them. They care about how the development could improve their lives.
It means jobs for people here, and for fishermen like us. As long as we can sail freely across the waters, then I don't see a problem.
That, the developer assures, fishermen will be able to do. But the bigger concern among residents, even though the development will be on the water, has been displacement.
Well, the developer says dislocation of families will be very limited. They will only affect roads leading to the artificial islands and then exiting from the artificial islands. So, for example, here, only that side of the road will be taken down, and even then, families will be relocated on site.
If all goes as planned, Davao's coastal population will be the first to benefit from Duterte's pivot to China. Although the project remains a joint venture between the government and local developer Mega Harbor Port and Development Incorporated, this is where some of the billions of dollars in pledges made during Duterte's trip to Beijing in October could soon turn into real investments. Barnaby, CGTN, Davao City, Southern Philippines.
Joining us now from Beijing is Chen Xiaochen. He's a researcher at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China. Here with us in our Washington, D.C. studio is Zhang. He's the chief correspondent with Shanghai Wen Hui Daily. From Hong Kong, we're joined by Reuben Mondejar. He's an associate professor in the Department of Management at City University of Hong Kong. And we're joined by Ronce Almond. He is a partner with the firm the Wicks Group here in Washington, D.C. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Chen Xiaochen, let me start with you. Relations between China and the Philippines have been getting closer since President Duterte's visit to Beijing last year. Now we've seen this cabinet delegation from the Philippines go to China. How would you characterize this changing, this evolving relationship between China and the Philippines? And looking at that cabinet visit, what was achieved?
Yeah, I think you're right. And since President Duterte's visit to China, and I think the China-Philippines relations has been better. I think especially the turning point is I think last November. So from then on, I think a lot of things has been achieved, especially in terms of economic ties and cooperation. So I think this delegation, I think led by Finance Secretary Mr. Carlos Domingos, has achieved a lot. For example, 3.7 billion as a sort of a first package to realize what the leaders have achieved during President Duterte's visit. And also, this first package will focus primarily on infrastructure, which is what the Philippines urgently needed. So, and also beyond that, I think in this Filipino delegation's visit to Beijing, especially poverty reduction issues has been raised as another primary focus because it's kind of a Chinese solution as a systematic poverty reduction project for the Philippines.
Reuben Mondejar, the Philippines has traditionally had a very close relationship with the United States. It's a relationship that goes back a long time, historical relationship, a military relationship. Now that is changing. We see the Philippines rebalance or pivot away from the United States towards China. How significant is that shift for the Philippines?
Well, you see, you used a word, rebalance, which was precisely what the United States was saying. They were doing a rebalancing in the relationship with Asia. Anyway, so that rebalancing is actually in a very new phase. Is in the first phase of what the president of the Philippines is saying. He's not really moving or cutting ties from the U.S. He's just making the interests of the Philippines primordial. So in dealing with China, getting closer to China is a consequence of making the Philippines the priority. Not the relationship with the United States, but what's the internal need of the Philippines, and that's the reason why getting close to China is a step in that direction.
Ronce, what is your view on that? China is the biggest importer of Philippines goods and is also the biggest exporter to the Philippines. So it's a very important regional relationship as far as economic relations are concerned between these two countries. But is the Philippines now looking at both China and the United States, balancing its relationship with those two countries and saying we want the best out of all of these relationships?
Anand, I think that's a great observation. Yeah. And I think you're right to point out that the Philippines, in its own strategic interests and its own neighborhood, has to balance its interests. I think Lord Palmerston, former Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, once said that we don't have any perpetual allies or indefinite enemies, but we have indefinite interests. And I think the Philippines has to look to its interests. It's interesting to see the commonality from Duterte and his maybe a Filipino-first approach and new President-elect Donald Trump in his America first approach. So I think maybe we're seeing maybe a recalibration of a redefinition of the interests in the region, and certainly here in the United States, but perhaps in Manila as well.
Zhang, we see the importance of this economic relationship between these two countries, but is it expanding in other areas as well? We just had President Duterte call upon the Chinese to patrol the area of the southern Philippines, saying that there are security threats over there. There are Islamic militants who are abducting sailors, who are attacking vessels. He's called upon China, not the United States, to act in that part of the world.
Yes, I think clearly beside this economic cooperation, there are other kind of cooperations. One is that China has extended support to Mr. Duterte's anti-drug kind of campaign in Philippines, and which is quite important because U.S. government has been reluctant to support this campaign. And China also has contributed one rehabilitation center to Philippine government. And on security side, I think beside the attempt of Philippine government to work together with Chinese side to fight against pirate and terrorist organizations, Philippines has also been requesting to import ammunition from Chinese side. And I think Philippines has been trying to diverse its security and military cooperation. And I think that is the new kind of approach of the Philippine government.
Right. Chen Xiaochen, we are talking about a bilateral relationship here, but this economic relationship, the trade relationship between the Philippines and the United States. But what does it do for the region, the Asian region as a whole?
I think it's now very important to bring back the economic issues or economic agendas back to Asia Pacific, especially around the China-ASEAN relations, because if during a time when the economic ties and economic cooperation is among the top agenda, and peace and development can be achieved. But during a time when the political tensions and the geopolitical issues are on the top of the agendas, and then tensions will be heated. So now is really the time to talk more about economics instead of geopolitics, and also talk more about the cooperations instead of the tensions.
Reuben, when we look at the projects that were announced after the cabinet delegation visit to China, we see that these projects are very focused. They're very targeted, that the aim is to reduce poverty in the Philippines. How important is that for the Philippines? And politically, how important is that for President Duterte?
Well, you see, the infrastructure for which these 3.7 billion projects are being targeted leads to poverty alleviation, poverty reduction eventually, because the previous administration in the Philippines actually spent less than 10% of GDP on infrastructure. And therefore, because of the poor infrastructure, the poverty issue was not really solved. So the target now of President Duterte is to keep up with his promise of not only eradicating drugs, but also improving the livelihood of the people and infrastructure development, especially this rail line that comes from Manila to the very south of the biggest island of the Philippines called Luzon. That's really going to make a big impact on the alleviation of poverty. And that will be, I think, a feather in the cap of President Duterte if he's able to accomplish this poverty reduction within his term.
Ronce, as I mentioned earlier, the Philippines has had a very close relationship, military relationship with the United States historically. But there are some analysts who believe that now the Philippines wants to strengthen its economic relationship with China, but yet at the same time retain that security blanket that it has from the United States. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that is a fair assessment. I think that the Philippines has to look at it's both its economic interest and its long-term strategic interest. With the United States, relationship has existed, as you mentioned earlier, for over a century. They have the Mutual Defense Treaty that goes back to 1951. During the Obama administration, they enhanced that agreement and allowing for rotation of regular troops into to the Philippines. And we've seen some comments from President Duterte kind of maybe perhaps balancing out those earlier commitments. So it's a very interesting dynamic right now in the Philippines-U.S. relationship. I'd say it's actually very fluid. We've seen yesterday the confirmation of the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, for Donald Trump, and we saw the earlier confirmation of Secretary of Defense Mattis. In both their congressional testimonies, they took a very hard stance in relation to China. So it's going to be interesting to see how this new dynamic from the Trump administration impacts the Philippines-Chinese relationship.
Song, and the outreach to the Philippines, this growing relationship, is not an isolated case. We see China reaching out to other countries in the region as well. Malaysia, for example. Malaysia, also a traditional ally of the United States. The Chinese are involved there in a number of energy, defense projects, railways projects. Are more countries in the region now looking to China?
First, I think Malaysia is not an official ally of America. Yeah. In the region, I think official allies of America are especially Philippines and Thailand previously. And Singapore is de facto allies of America. And Malaysia, Indonesia are kind of, including recently Vietnam, they are being called partners of America in the region. Right. And I will not call this kind of recent developments as pivots. And this kind of Southeastern Asia countries are basically have been following balanced for foreign policy toward America and China, even to some other countries. And they have been long time dependent on America on security cooperation, and also being very close with China on economic cooperations. And in the last couple of years, however, especially Philippines was completely sidelined with America on the issue of South China Sea. But in the last couple of months, we have already seen the kind of recovery of good links between Southeastern Asian countries, including Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, and some other countries. And in the future, I think we will continue to see these kind of countries to follow a balanced approach between US, China, maybe also Japan, India, and even Russia.